For 35 years, Final Fantasy has dazzled us with its amazing characters and unique stories, spanning generations of gamers. Now I'm going to take a Final Fantasy content creator through a random Final Fantasy XIV dungeon, and we will discuss all things Final Fantasy. Welcome to Dungeon Run with Arrows. Welcome, everybody, to the prologue episode of Dungeon Run with Arrows. You guys know, you follow me on Twitter, social medias, you know this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Before we get into like a core series, we're just going to do like a little prologue episode, a cool little prologue episode, talking to you guys about me, about my love for Final Fantasy, where it spawned from, where it came from, hopefully where it's going. And yeah, I'm really excited. So before we get into anything, you guys want to be alerted to any of these episodes when they come out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ding the notification bell, Warriors of Light, and let's enjoy a love of a great video game series together. If you guys don't know, it was in 1987 in December that Final Fantasy I launched on the Famicom in Japan. That is the Nintendo, if you guys don't know. Back then, Squaresoft, because they weren't Square Enix then, Squaresoft, I wonder if they knew what kind of a game series they had on their hands when they started this. This series has expanded into so many other different genres of gaming. There's fighting games that have come out for it. There is racing games that have spawned from this series. Of course, Chocobo Racing, Chocobo GP. The characters from this series have appeared in so many other franchises throughout the years, and it just continues to be probably one of the most well-known JRPG series in history. So what we're doing here is, after this episode, I would like to do a Final Fantasy XIV dungeon with some of your favorite content creators going forward, hearing about their experiences with the franchise as a whole, their experiences with Final Fantasy XIV. Did Final Fantasy XIV inspire them to play the other Final Fantasies? So what we're going to do is we're going to load up a duty roulette dungeon every time we play. Not a leveling dungeon or a trial or anything like that, because they could be really short. And not one of the raids, because they are just really hard to watch. So what we're going to do is, while we're playing through this dungeon, we're going to talk to your favorite Final Fantasy content creators, 14 content creators, about their love of this series, their love of this game. What's their favorite dungeon? Who are their favorite NPCs? What do they want to see from this game going forward? And then we'll also talk about like if there's any Final Fantasy news going on as well. There is some Final Fantasy news, obviously, right now. If you guys did not know, they just recently started reopening data center travel in this game, which is why we're doing this series in the first place. Because when it launched yesterday, so many people were trying to go to different data centers that it crashed the game. And so they closed it out, and they've been slowly reopening it. Last night when I was playing this game for a little bit, I was not able to to data center travel yet, but when I hopped in this morning to get ready to record this episode, we were able to, in fact, data center travel now as it is. So this is where this series was born. I've wanted to do something like this for such a long time, but if you wanted to do something like this before, you wanted to play dungeons with your friends and they were on they had to be in the same server in the same data center, and you'd have to go and create a new character on that new data center, play through the game to be able to do something like this. So what this is going to be as a whole is kind of like a podcast style, getting to know your favorite creators thing while we play through a Final Fantasy XIV dungeon. I'm really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. What I might do with it going forward is if the creator that we're going to be doing a dungeon with has a favorite dungeon, we might just try to load into that dungeon instead of doing the duty roulette. Like, for example, my favorite dungeon is the Stone Vigil in A Realm Reborn. I love like the wintry, like broken down castle aesthetic to it, and I think all the monsters you fight are really cool looking. And I like the mechanic in the second mini boss fight, where you have to like throw snowballs at the final boss. It's just a really fun dungeon to do, and I love the aesthetic for it. So if our favorite content creators have a favorite dungeon, then we will hop in and do those dungeons instead. But yeah, I'm just super excited for this, and it's going to be a lot of fun. If you guys are familiar with the channel, you know we've done Final Fantasy XIV content on here before. Dungeons with Mrs. Arrows, where we took my wife through some Final Fantasy dungeons in A Realm Reborn. She has, of course, has not played for a while, but I'm hoping we can boot that series back up as well. And yeah, now we're just going to wait to get into a dungeon, and then we will be on our way. All right, here we go. The first dungeon of Dungeon Run with arrows. What do we got? Ooh, the anti-tower. This is a good one. This is the frog one, isn't it? I think it is. Yes, it is. Alrighty, so this is in the Heaven's Ward expansion. So we're not gonna have access to our full list of things, but that's okay. That is okay. Alrighty, let's do this. We got a Gunbreaker, a White Mage, and a Ninja. So I actually, the first Final Fantasy game I ever played, like ever played, was Final Fantasy VII. And I like to say Final Fantasy VII is my origin story. That's the game that got me into like RPGs. JRPGs. I'd played like some on the Super Nintendo, like Super Mario RPG, and you guys probably don't know this one as well, but the Twisted Tales of Spike McFang. But like, I'd never been like hugely invested in them. I didn't touch any of the Final Fantasies on the Super Nintendo. But I was never like super invested, in, like that I had to go out and have these games like right when they first came out. Not like I am now. But all that changed in 1998 when my parents finally got a PlayStation. And one of the games they bought was Final Fantasy VII, which I always thought was weird because, like, up until that point, my dad in particular was never, ever a huge RPG guy. He was never an RPG fan. But he bought Final Fantasy VII. And to this day, I don't know why. I don't know what inspired that. And I don't think I ever really asked, and I don't have like a really strong relationship with them now to ask. But I've always been curious about why he picked up Final Fantasy VII when he was never really a big RPG guy. But yeah, like, and I fell in love with the game. I loved the characters, especially Aerith. Aerith Gainsborough is probably my favorite character in Final Fantasy history. I loved the gameplay. I loved the storyline, even though it gets a little confusing at times. But then again, what good RPG doesn't have a storyline that gets confusing at certain times? And I really sparked my love for this genre. And like I said, I dabbled in it lightly with the like minimal games on the Super Nintendo that I had played in the RPG genre. And going forth now, I just really had this love for it. So of course, when Final Fantasy VIII came out, we got Final Fantasy VIII. When Legend of Dragoon came out, we got Legend of Dragoon. And then same thing with Final Fantasy IX, and I just fell in love with this series. So I went back and I replayed some of the older games when they came out on, when they got ported up to the PlayStation in those collections. You had, what was it? It was Final Fantasy IV and 6, and Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy V. So then we started going backwards and playing more, and I got into emulators to play like the older games, like the Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. And so yeah, Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is my origin story. I like to call it my origin story into JRPGs, because RPGs in general. Because without Final Fantasy VII, I might not have played Pokemon. Without Final Fantasy VII, I probably would not have fallen in love with the Pokemon franchise, because like I said, I wasn't a huge RPG player at the time. So a lot of like what I've done in gaming since then is because of Final Fantasy VII, because of this series as a whole. So I'm like really excited for all the new Final Fantasy VII content we have coming. Oh. So I was a frog there. I forgot about that mechanic. And like, so, but I didn't dabble a lot in the MMO Final Fantasies. I mean, I guess technically only 11 was the MMO Final Fantasy at the time, and I didn't have a computer. I grew up, I don't want to say I grew up poor, but we definitely grew up like more middle class. So like, it was hard to have like, a computer. It was hard to get a computer, and it was hard to like get like good internet access to like go forward and play Final Fantasy XI. So I never got into the MMO aspect of the series, although I've heard 11 is like fantastic. And same thing with the original Final Fantasy XIV, and we never really got to play that. I was gonna pick up Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn when it came out on the PlayStation, but on the PlayStation 3, but I had heard like a lot of like, I don't want to say bad reviews, but I had heard like it didn't run very well on that console. So we never dabbled in it. But when the PlayStation 4 came out and they announced that Final Fantasy XIV was going to be coming out on the PlayStation 4, I was in. I love this series. I've heard good things. I heard good things about Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn on PC. And when they said that it was going to play very similarly to PC on the PlayStation 4, I was in. I was in 100%. And so I picked it up, and honestly, this is now my second favorite Final Fantasy game. My first favorite Final Fantasy game will always be Final Fantasy VIII. To me, Final Fantasy VIII, yes, a lot of people hate on Final Fantasy VIII because of the different mechanics that they experimented. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like junctioning. And, you know, the storyline gets incredibly convoluted. I am not knocking it. I am not saying it's a perfect game, because it is definitely not. But for me, the story, like, I just really fell in love with that game. I love the junctioning mechanic. I might be the only person in the world who does. I love the fact that it's a Final Fantasy game that you can beat at a ridiculously lower level, because the game levels up with you. And I love watching low level playthroughs, and of course you got Triple Triad, man. Like, Triple Triad. How can you not love Triple Triad? I mean, it's so popular that they put it into Final Fantasy XIV in the Gold Saucer, which is fantastic. But like, as far as like 14 goes, I definitely feel like it's, by the end of it, it might overtake Final Fantasy VIII as my favorite Final Fantasy, because like, I stream a lot on Twitch TV, Arrows Gaming, and we play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and like, I streamed pretty much my entire Shadowbringers playthrough and my entire Endwalker playthrough. And one of the reasons why, another one of the reasons why I've gone back and started a new character on this game is so that I could stream like on my Realm Reborn playthroughs and Heaven's Ward playthroughs and Stormblood playthroughs, because I'm so in love with this series. And it just makes me so excited that now I'm able to like travel to different data centers and play with different friends that I have that might not play on this data center with me. And so that's where this idea, I actually had this idea for like this like podcast-esque style dungeon playthrough of Final Fantasy XIV pretty much when I started streaming. When I started streaming Final Fantasy XIV, and I found other people who played the game, and they were so wholesome and so awesome, and it just made me super, super excited. For the game, and like, I've wanted to do this for like the longest time, but like I said when we were queuing up the dungeon, in order to do it, you would have to in order to do it, you would have to like be. You'd have to go and create characters on a bunch of different servers and a bunch of different data centers in order to like get that feel and interact with the different with the different people. So now that we're here and we have, I'm gonna die. Now that I'm here and we have like the ability to like play now on different data centers due to the new update, I'm excited because I'm gonna get to like play Final Fantasy with all of these amazing content creators. And see their love of this franchise, which is gonna be amazing. Like I said, maybe we'll play. Maybe instead of doing a random duty, we'll play on their favorite dungeon. You guys, I told you my favorite dungeon, the Stone Vigil. I just love the aesthetic. I don't actually think I have a least favorite dungeon. There are obviously ones that you get that you don't like playing more than others. Like, I guess if I had to pick one, it would probably be one of the first 3 dungeons. Not because they're bad dungeons, but because I like to call them the trial dungeons. They're the initial 3 dungeons. Sasasha, Tamtara Deepcroft, and Coffbell Mines. You can't die in those dungeons. So you're just kind of like going through, and they are a little boring compared to like some of the like more like cooler and fun dungeons that you get later on in the series, in the game. Compared to them, they are boring, and I don't like feeling like I'm sitting on autopilot. And with those 3 dungeons, I do. With those 3 dungeons, I 100% feel like I'm on autopilot, and I get it. That's what they're there for. They're there to teach you the mechanics of dungeon running, and I get that. But for me, I just wish that they were. I just don't like getting them when they come up in my rotation. But I like getting like dungeons like this. Like, I love this dungeon. The Anti-Tower is so much fun. And I love getting a lot of the Shadowbringers dungeons because I love the aesthetic of them. Especially what is it? The Rabiel's Peak or whatever it's called, where you fight your second Light Warden. That'll be the dungeon I usually queue up when I want to like level up people in that area. And so it's just really good, really fun to play in those dungeons. So it's just a good time. It's just a fun time playing in those dungeons. And for trials, I feel my favorite trial is a toss-up between King Moogle and Susano. I love the mechanic with the sword with Susano, where you have to like stop the sword from attacking after you've done certain amount of damage to Susano when it goes into like phase 2 into phase 3. I love that. And King Moogle, like, how can you not love King Moogle Mog? It is such a fun and adorable trial to play. The King Moogle Mog trial is so much fun, and you just have to love it. Like, I love King Moogle Mog. It's not a hard dungeon, as long as you're paying attention to what you're doing. It's not a hard dungeon. Oh, this is the one with the dolls, right? Calcabrina. I love this. I love this boss fight. It's so good. It's so good. Also, this cutscene is like one of the creepiest cutscenes in this game. Creepiest cutscenes. I don't think I have like a least favorite trial. I actually have a story about what my least favorite trial used to be as we get into this fight. So on my initial playthrough of A Realm Reborn, I had such a pain in the behind with Garuda. Not because Garuda normal, not even Garuda hard. Like the first time I got to Garuda hard, it was so easy. And the reason is when I played through my initial run of A Realm Reborn with Artemis. Yes, I sometimes talk about Artemis like she's an actual person. When we hit the Garuda normal, the first team I went through with, would not stay away from the pillars. They would not stay away from the pillars, so when out... So whenever Garuda would drop down to do her ultimate attack, we would all be wiped. Because they were not staying away from the pillars, and it made me so mad. It made me so mad that I actually had to turn off the game and not play it for a couple days. Okay, why are you not? Thank you. Because I was just so mad. And then when I went back in through with another team the next day, we beat Garuda on the first playthrough because the teammates that I had then knew what they were doing. They stayed off the pillars. And we won on the first shot. So like I don't have like a least favorite trial, but for the longest time I used to dread getting Garuda normal. Which is hilarious because Garuda hard is so easy, and I love Garuda hard when she splits into the other two primals. It's always a good time. But yeah, like this game is just so much fun, and I'm really excited for what we're gonna do going forward with it. We just did our first duty. We just finished our first duty for dungeon run. Really excited. Really excited. It was really good. Also, I love my bard. I feel like I should have said this at the start. The main reason why... So I did a lot of research. On this game before I bought it for the PS4. And I did a lot of looking into like the different characters. The different classes, the different races. I knew I was going to be higher. I knew I wanted to be a human. And I knew I wanted to be a bard because I have a thing with arrows, if you didn't know. I have a thing with arrows. And I was really excited to play as a bard. And I was looking at like how all the cool bard outfits look. Like I think the bard class has some of like the best outfits in the game. Like they just look so cool. But I did not like the way they looked on the male Hyor. So that's why we play as a female character in the game. Other races I play as a male. Like right now we're playing as a Hrothgar on my second playthrough, and if there was a male one, I would still play as it. All the different classes. For different classes, all the items I find look better on the male characters, like the armor and stuff that I have right now as my Dragoon in my other playthrough. It looks fantastic, and I think like stuff like that looks really good on the male characters and the female characters. But all the bard outfits, I did not like the look of them on the male characters. I'm like, these do not look good. If I'm gonna be saving the world, I want to be looking good while we do it. So that's why we play as a female character. This is honestly my favorite outfit right now. It's glamored. It's not like what it is. What we're showing is not what the actual outfit is. I don't actually remember what the actual outfit is. It's been so long. So we're glamored up right now as our bard. And yeah, it's just really cool. We have green and purple hair because my favorite color is green and Mrs. Arrow's favorite color is purple. So I wanted to have like a little bit of us in the character as well. And yeah, and the black cat is following me because Mrs. Arrows loves cats. That's pretty much it. That wraps that up. So yeah, thank you guys for checking out our first episode, our prologue episode of Dungeon Run. And yeah, it's been good. If you guys like this video, don't forget to if you guys like the video, don't forget to share it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these Dungeon Run episodes. Like I said, we want to try doing them maybe like once a month. I'll probably do the second episode. I'll probably do like the first full episode in a couple weeks. Do like the prologue in the first episode in a couple weeks, and then we'll maybe go into more of a monthly basis. Unless you guys really like it and it really picks up, then we will maybe get into doing it on like a 2-week basis. And yeah, I'm just really excited for this series. I'm really excited for what they're going to do with this series. Obviously, we're getting patch 6.2 on the 22nd of August. That is going to be fun. It's going to be really interesting to see where they're going to take the story. Because if you guys have caught up to the end of this game, you know that Endwalker is just crazy. So I'm really excited to see what we're going to do after that. If it continues more of like, if we get like more back down to earth, doing adventure things, or if we're gonna have like another catastrophe that we have to deal with. It's gonna be really good. It'll be really good. Well, thank you guys for checking out the video. Like I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. Ding the notification bell if you wanted to be alerted when more Dungeon Run with Arrows comes out. Also, we do Final Fantasy TCG content as well on the channel. I've been going to a lot of local tournaments lately, so we're gonna be hopefully getting back into recording gameplay for that. And as always, friends, stay safe out there, and I will see you when I see you. Have yourselves a great rest of your week, and stay safe, friends.